the marriage.
Yeah, indeed. I just grabbed kids to go to the gym today. So he started to go to the gym for the personal training class. And then he was dying.
Okay, guys, I think we can kick off now at this stage. So hello to everybody, both JCI Ireland, people here in Ireland, and people all the way over in Brazil, across the pond, across the Atlantic. So greetings to everybody. I'd especially like to welcome the national president of JCI Brazil and a very, very good friend of mine, Tynan Mariano Costa. We'll give him his full name. Tynan and I go way back. Tynan was actually, for those of you that don't know, he was a member of JCI Ireland a number of years ago, and a super member at that. And I have to say that my first international trip in JCI was over at the World Congress in Rio, Brazil, when Tynan and the other Brazilian organizers did a phenomenal job to pull the Congress together. So we've many great memories and many good times. Some can be shared publicly, some maybe more privately, but yeah, some good times indeed. And we have, so before I introduce our first speaker, we do have a wonderful lineup of speakers this evening. And it's sad to say that this is the last day of the startup of you. So I know you're all very, very disappointed, but there is still plenty of enjoyment and fun to come over this evening. So our first speaker is Eric Fitzpatrick from ARC Speaking and Training. So Eric will be speaking for approximately 45 minutes. And if anybody has any questions, there will be about 5 to 10 minutes at the end where you can ask Eric directly. You can also put your questions in the chat box throughout, and they can be answered at the end. So I know you haven't tuned in to listen to me. So without further ado, I would like to introduce Eric. So we have a session that will be now delivered by an international speaker and author. He'll be speaking about how to persuade on purpose, create presentations that influence and engage. Over the last 15 years, he's worked with organizations across a range of industries, helping them to increase their influence when communicating with colleagues and clients. He is an ex-international soccer player, the author of Persuade on Purpose, Create Presentations that Influence and Engage, and has been a good friend and in fact a great friend to JCI for many years. So with huge pleasure, I would like to please welcome Eric Fitzpatrick.
Thank you very much. Are we? Yes, much better. Okay, right. First of all, to everybody, I'm delighted to be here. Ronan, thank you. Before I start, can I just say, I'm going to make this an interactive session. I'd like to have a little bit of fun while we're doing this. So can I ask everybody to consider putting on their cameras so that we can see everybody, so that we can build those connections? I'm going to do an exercise in a moment, and I'm going to need to see people's cameras on as well so that we can see the exercise. And as I said, we're going to have a little bit of fun while we're doing this. Before I get into what I'm going to do, I just want to say that about 2 weeks ago, I was doing a little bit of work with 3 of the universities over here, Trinity College, University College Dublin, and the University of Limerick. I was helping them create presentations that they will deliver in September. And the purpose of their presentations will be to persuade international students to come and study in their universities in September of 2021. But when we'd finished the work and the presentations were created, the person who had hired me said to me, they said, Eric, while we brought you in to work on our presentations, the ideas that you have shared can be applied to multiple ways in which we communicate. And one of the things that I would ask you to consider as we go through the next 45 minutes is that while we're going to talk about pitching and presenting, the ideas can be applied to a number of other areas. Anya, would you do me a favor? Would you put yourself on mute just for one moment, please? And what we're going to talk about this evening We can apply to pitching, whether it's a short 3-minute pitch. We can apply to presentations, whether it's 20 minutes or 40 minutes. We can apply it to one-to-one conversations. We can apply it to email. I just ask you to hold that at the forefront of your thinking. I'm going to do 3 things in the next 45 minutes. 1, I'm going to challenge your thinking around what constitutes an effective presentation. 2, I'm going to introduce you to what I call the 4 essential criteria that I believe we have to meet if our presentation or our pitch is going to be successful. And 3, I'm going to give you a template that you can use for all future presentations. You'll see a copy of it this evening during the session. But when it's done, I'm going to send a copy of it to Ronan and to Claire so that they can share it with everybody who's on the call this evening. Before I start, can I just check, is there anybody who's on this call tonight who attended the session that I delivered at the European conference a few weeks ago? You were there, Ronan, were you? Okay, but you might have been the only person. So we're going to do a couple of exercises very, very quickly. The other thing that I just want to say before we do this exercise is at the end of this evening, if you have enjoyed what I've been doing, I would like to make an offer to JCI. I've been making this to different JCI chapters and organizations as I delivered the webinars, and it'll be a chance to be able to buy a product at what would be about a 75% discount. That's what I'm going to do for JCI. But before all of that, and the reason that I want people to have their cameras on is to begin with, I would like you to draw, if you have pen and paper, I would like you to draw a pig. A farmyard animal, yes. Please draw a pig. You weren't expecting that. So when you have drawn your pig, what I'm going to ask you to do is just hold it up to the screen so that everybody can see the pig that you have drawn. Yes, you weren't expecting an art class this evening. Oh, Gorkum squeezes in his pig at the end of the page. Alma's pig is looking straight out at us. Carol looks like she's got very creative with her pig. Nicola's pig looks like it's actually sitting up rather than, yes, I like your style. What you'll see, ladies and gentlemen, is that all of the pigs are very different. And part of the reason for that is because my instructions weren't clear enough and they weren't specific enough. But the way in which I communicated my message is exactly how we all communicate. So I think one of the things that we need to do is reduce the opportunity for misinterpretation, to remove the opportunity for people to be able to interpret the information we're presenting. Because if they can interpret it, there's a danger they'll pick up the wrong message. And it's about how we eliminate that. So that's what we're going to do. Let me just share my screen for a moment, please. So as I said, this is what we're going to do this evening. To begin with, what I'd like to talk about are what I call the 4 essential criteria. I think we have to meet these when we communicate. The first of them is that what we say must contribute to the thinking of the listener. And that might seem like the most obvious piece of advice to give anybody, but the reality is we don't do that well enough. We're very good at saying what we want to say. We're not as good at saying what the other person needs to hear. If I can phrase it this way, we're very good at talking about the features. We're not quite as good as talking about the benefits. Number 2, what we say must be easy to remember or recall. In a startup situation, there will be occasions when you will be pitching to venture capitalists. You'll be looking for funding. And you'll pitch them today, but they won't make the decision today. It could be tomorrow, it could be next week, it could be next month. And the challenge is, how do you make sure they can remember what you said? How can you make sure they remember the value in what you're offering? So we've got to be able to present information in a way that makes it easier to remember. Number 3, it must be easy to understand. And the challenge on occasions is because when we present, we are experts, or we're the people most familiar with our service, our product, our idea. And there are times that as experts, we hide behind our expertise. So being able to simplify our language, being able to present the information in a way that makes it so much easier for everybody else, hugely valuable. And the 4th criteria, when we are communicating with people, we must engage. One of the reasons I asked you to draw the pig so early on is so that you're not spending time just listening to me talk. I want you to feel a part of this presentation. I want you to feel like you can contribute to this presentation, even if there are times I don't want you to verbalize your response. But you must feel like you're engaged in the presentation. They're my 4 criteria. The reality is that a day, a week, a month from now, you may not remember the 4 criteria, but the following might help. The acronym TRUE captures those 4 criteria: think, recall, understand, and engage. A week from now, you'll remember TRUE. And if you can remember TRUE, you have a chance of being able to remember those 4. Ronan and Thine, and I promise not to die on the call. I'll wait until I'm finished. So they're my 4 criteria. We have to keep them at the forefront of our thinking. When it comes to our pitch, when it comes to our presentation, there are 6 component parts. So a lot of people look at a presentation or a pitch as this one individual unit. I break it down into these 6 component parts. Number 1, pre-presentation. You've been asked to create a pitch, you've been asked to create a presentation. Where do you start? Number 2, how do you open? What is the purpose of your opening? What are you trying to achieve with it? Number 3, what is your presentation? What is your pitch message? Number 4, how do you structure your pitch? And I'm going to share ideas in that section, which I believe are a game changer. Number 5, how do you keep people engaged? And again, I think that is a game changer when it comes to pitching and presenting. And then how do you close your presentation? And why is your closing so important? So let's start. Pre-presentation. You've been asked to create a presentation. Where do you start? The first starting point is to get crystal clear on who your audience is. Because if you're clear about who your audience is, you can be clear about, or you give yourself a better chance of being clear about what's important to them. And that means that you can tailor your content to reflect what's important to them. A number of years ago, I was doing a little bit of work with a guy who was going over to Boston in July of 2018. And he was asked to deliver a presentation on the very same subject, but to 3 different audiences. One of the audiences was senior management. And I've been coaching this guy for about a month. And on one occasion, having already agreed that senior management was his audience, but asking him to consider in real depth who his audience was, he turned around to me on one of the visits that I made. He said, Eric, I've changed my mind. Senior management isn't my audience. And I went, okay. I said, who's your audience? And he went, Kevin. And I said, brilliant. He said, who's Kevin? And he went, Kevin is the senior vice president of, and he listed his title. And then he said to me, he said, if I can get Kevin to buy into my message, he'll be able to get the rest of the senior management team to buy into the message. So the first thing is to be crystal clear about who your audience is. And it may not always be everybody that you were presenting to. I was delivering a webinar this morning for a technology skill net here in Ireland. Within that technology skill net, some of the client companies include IBM, include Medtronic, include Hewlett-Packard, and Johnson & Johnson. My presentation was solely aimed at the person representing Johnson & Johnson. So the examples I gave were designed to be relevant to that particular person. Why? Because that's the client I want to do business with. Second thing, what's your objective? What do you actually want to achieve at the end of your presentation? And the best way that I can explain this is to be able to get crystal clear about what you want your audience to do, to think, to believe, or how do you want them to act at the end of your presentation, at the end of your pitch? And one of the things that I would suggest is that typically there are 3 or 4 objectives when you're creating a pitch, when you're creating a presentation. They are to inform, to motivate, to entertain, and to persuade. One of the big mistakes that I see a lot of presenters make is that they deliver informative presentations when they're actually trying to persuade somebody to take an action at the end of that presentation. So what I coach people to do, or what I suggest, is that going forward, for any presentation you ever deliver, when you're answering this question, what's my objective? Start your answer to that question with the words, my objective is to persuade, and then look at how you finish that sentence, how you finish that answer. And that will allow you to tailor content that will give you a better chance of having your audience take the action you would like them to take at the end of your presentation. The third thing to do in the pre-presentation stage is brainstorm. You're going to give a pitch and it's 3 minutes long, but you're an expert on your subject. It means you could talk about it all day. How do you decide what goes into that 3 minutes? And for me, one of the best ways to be able to find the best content is to get as many ideas out of your head as possible. Carol, obviously you're based in Galway. 2 years ago, I worked with a woman over there from the Galway Convention Bureau. We created a 2-minute pitch, and she had to go over to London in October of 2018 to deliver that pitch to associations over there. And her job was to persuade them to bring their conferences to Galway in 2019, 2020. We spent 2 hours out of 2 days doing the brainstorming piece. And at the end of the 2 hours, we believed, every idea possible out of her head. And I turned to write something on a flip chart. And as I did, she passed one last comment, which for her was just a throwaway comment. It meant nothing to her. It's just something to get out of her head and complete the process. But she turned around. Her throwaway comment was, oh yeah, and of course, Galway is known as the city of the tribes. And as soon as she said it, I went, that's what we're building your presentation around. If you don't do the brainstorming session in the pre-presentation phase, you end up running the risk of either missing out some really good ideas to support getting your message across, or you end up putting too much content into your presentation, hoping that some of it will stick. So that's pre-presentation. When that's done, we then look at how you open your presentation. And for me, the object of the opening of a presentation is purely about disruption. It's about disrupting your audience's attention. Ladies and gentlemen, every person who's on this call this evening has many things going on in their lives that are much more important than listening to me speak. And rightly so. Right now, some of you might have children and it's time to start putting those children to bed, and that might be a priority. Hopefully, Carol, you're going to stay married and the rows that you're having with Keith aren't going to be too much trouble. But for any of us, if we have had a row with a partner, that could be playing on our mind. If we have a child who is sick, that could be playing on our mind. If some of you have a project in work which has a deadline that's very, very close to a completion date, that could be playing on your mind. My job as a presenter, my job when I'm pitching, is to stop you thinking about all of those things. So what I'm going to do very briefly is I'm going to tell you how not to open a pitch or a presentation, and then I'm going to share some of the ways in which you can. The don'ts when it comes to crafting a pitch or a presentation. 1, don't start with the grateful opening, and a lot of people do. And the grateful opening, ladies and gentlemen, is where we stand up and we go, thank you so much for giving me a chance to speak to you today. Forgive my language, but that has no value to anybody. So please avoid doing that. Why do we do it? Because we're nervous, because we want to ease into our presentation, but it has no value to our audience. It doesn't contribute to their thinking. The second don't is the apologetic opening. I saw somebody doing this recently on one of these webinars. They started the presentation by saying, look, I'm really sorry about this. I was only asked to deliver this a few minutes ago. I haven't even had a chance to look at the slides. Somebody else was supposed to deliver the presentation. If it's not perfect, I hope you'll understand. And again, what people are doing, ladies and gentlemen, is they are trying to protect themselves in an environment where they are nervous about the presentation they're about to give. The third don't is what I call the introductory opening, and particularly the big, long-winded introductory opening. We're going to play a very quick version of what I call the so what game. So I'm going to ask everybody, if you don't mind, just take your microphones off mute for one moment, please. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a series of sentences. And I would just like you to say, so what, after each sentence. Will you do that for me? So with your microphones on off mute, so that I can hear everybody. Here we go. Hi, my name is Eric Fitzpatrick.
So what?
I'm from a company called ARC Speaking and Training.
So
what?
We've been around since 2010.
So what?
We're based in Dublin.
So what?
We have 3 people working for us.
So what?
Sorry, can I just say, some of you seem to be enjoying this just a little bit too much right now. But can you see how none of that information is relevant to you? With respect, this is a webinar on how you can pitch more effectively, how you can present your ideas more effectively. If Claire had asked somebody else to do it and I wasn't available, there isn't anybody in this call tonight who would have turned around and go, I'm not attending, Eric's not delivering the webinar. You're here because you're hoping to learn something that will be of value. If I was delivering a presentation and I hadn't been introduced by Ronan, I would have started by saying something like, hi, my name is Eric Fitzpatrick. I'm from a company called ARC Speaking and Training. And over the next 45 minutes, I'm going to share with you a number of ideas that will help to transform your next pitch or your next presentation. That last sentence, that's the only thing you're interested in. So how can we start a presentation, a pitch, and capture or disrupt our audience's attention? Very, very quickly, you can start by asking a question. You can start by getting your audience to do something, like drawing a pig. You can start by telling a story, as I did at the beginning of this presentation when I told a story about the universities. You can start by referencing something on the mind of your audience. You can start by referencing something that you know your audience is familiar with, or something that has already happened. You can start by adding a bit of humor. These are all powerful ways in which you can connect with your audience at the beginning of a presentation and you can disrupt them. But, and the one that I would recommend if you're delivering a pitch and it's only 3 or 5 minutes long, the opening is called State Your Outcomes. And with that type of opening, you're not going to tell people what you're going to talk about. You're going to tell people how they will benefit from listening to what you're going to talk about. I mentioned that guy earlier who went across to Boston to deliver that pitch. The opening line that we crafted for him said the following. He said, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm going to talk about for the next 10 minutes is potentially a $600 billion opportunity for our organization. Do you think senior management wanted to know what was going to come next? Of course they did. And that's how you can, another way in which you go, when you see the template, you see a whole host of ways in which you can open your presentation. Right, the next thing that I want to talk about very, very quickly is presentation message. If I'm doing a training workshop at this stage, I would say to all of you, you're speaking for 45 minutes, how many messages do you think it's okay to deliver in 45 minutes? And I get answers like 3, 5, 7. I was doing a webinar. No, I wasn't. I was in Serbia, in Belgrade, doing a session last October for JCI Serbia. And I asked that question of the people in the room. And one woman went, 45 minutes, 100 messages. The answer, ladies and gentlemen, to that question, how many messages can you deliver in a presentation, is 1. And it doesn't matter how long your presentation is going to take, whether it's 5 minutes or 45 minutes, 1 message. You might have more points to support that 1 message in the 45 minutes, but if at the end of your presentation, your audience gets that 1 message, that's the job done. And that's what you're looking to achieve. Now, presentation structure, and this for me is a game changer. I'm going to say right now that if any of you have ever given presentations, there is a real possibility that you've never included a structure in your presentation. And some of you will now be pushing back against that, even if it's only in your mind, well, I have. I've had an opening, I've had a middle, and I have a closing. And you probably have, but that's not a structure. Imagine for a moment that your presentation is 20 minutes long. That means that the opening might be 2 minutes, the closing might be 2 minutes. So the body of your presentation is 16 minutes long. That can be a long time to keep an audience engaged. So what I believe we need to do is break that 16 minutes down into smaller component parts. What I'm going to do is I'm going to give you a couple of structures that you can use to be able to make that happen. And the benefit of these structures are that, 1, it makes it easier for you as a presenter to follow the progress of your presentation. It certainly makes it easier for your audience to follow the progress of the presentation. But the added benefit is this. Imagine for a moment somebody's listening to you give a presentation, and at some stage in that presentation, in that pitch, they get distracted and they switch off. When they re-engage with your pitch, with your presentation, if they can't re-engage with it quickly and easily, they'll spend time trying to work out how you got to where you are now in the presentation compared with where you were when they were listening to you originally. And if they can't work that out very quickly, if they can't find the flow, they're going to switch off and stop listening altogether. So if you insert a deliberate structure into your presentation, it'll make it easier for your audience to re-engage with your presentation, easier for you to follow the flow, and easier for your audience to follow the flow. The first type of structure they're going to share with you is what's called a numerical structure. Rhetorical structure, a numerical structure presentation. And the idea is that I'm going to give you 3, 5, 10 reasons 10 ways in which you can. The example I always give, ladies and gentlemen, is in January, you always see so many advertisements for 5 ways to get fit this January. But as a structure, it's very easy to follow. And as a presenter, you start by saying, now, the first way to get fit this January is. And the beauty of it is, if you're about to share information with me that I like, I can stay and listen to it. If you're going to tell me something I don't want to listen to, I can switch off. So let's say I say to you, the first way to get fit this January is do more exercise. And you listen to that and you're thinking, but Eric, I do exercise 5 days a week. I exercise in the morning, I exercise in the evening. I have no more time or no more interest in doing more exercise. So you switch off and you stop listening. Now I need to make it easy for you to re-engage with my presentation. And the point at which you hear me say, now, the second way to get fit this January is, that's a point at which you can re-engage with my presentation and you don't have to worry about what you might have missed during the first reason to get fit, the first way that you can get fit this January. That makes it easier for the audience. The added benefit of a numerical structure is that if I'm giving you 5 ways to get fit this January, when you hear me say, now, the third way to get fit this January is, the other thought that goes through your mind is, great, we're halfway through. I can hang on a little bit longer. And that makes it easier for your audience. Second structure I'm going to share with you very briefly is what's called a rhetorical question structure. And this is probably my favorite structure. And particularly for pitching, I think it's a very powerful structure. The principle behind this structure is that I'm going to try and anticipate the questions that I believe you as an audience would want me to answer. And in my pitch, in my presentation, I'm going to ask the question and I'm going to provide the answer. What makes our product different from everything else on the market? Provide that answer. How much of a stake would we be interested in allowing you as a venture capitalist to have? What sort of investment are we looking for you to make? When do we anticipate you being able to get a return on that investment? If I've got the questions right, people are going to lean in because they will want to hear the answers to those questions. Again, when you see the template, you will see probably about 6 or 7 different structures. The key when it comes to structure, in the very same way with message, is to pick one structure. What happens at the moment is that people often don't pick a structure, and by accident they end up inserting a number of structures into the presentation, and that just causes confusion for their audience. Right, presentation closing. And again, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share with you a couple of don'ts. The first don't, when it comes to how you close your presentation, for those of you who have ever used slides, please do not finish your presentation with a slide that contains the following 2 words. I suspect everybody has done that at some stage. Ladies and gentlemen, we don't need a slide to be able to say thank you to our audience. And not only that, but if you think of the way presentations and pitches are delivered and the structure of a presentation or a pitch format, the last slide that you put up will often be there after you have finished presenting. It tends to just linger. You know, for example, if you take what Roland said this evening, I could leave the last slide of my deck up on screen while I'm taking questions. And that will be a chance for me to reinforce the message that I would like my audience to take away. What I think is more powerful as a final slide is a reinforcement of the message you would like your audience to take away. And if you can craft that message in one single sentence, and that single sentence is the last thing that people see, that could be a hugely powerful reinforcement of the message you'd like people to hear. I was doing work last year for an association of chartered accountants over here. And my 45-minute session was the last session of the day, and I chose not to use slides. And on one of the days, it was a roadshow, Sligo, Galway, Limerick, Cork. But at the Sligo event, the screen was up at quite a height. And the person who was speaking before me left their slides on while I was presenting. So for 45 minutes, their last slide was visible to everybody because I didn't need it, it wasn't in my way. And all it said on their last slide was, any questions? Whereas they would have had a golden opportunity to reinforce their message for a further 45 minutes. The second way to avoid finishing a presentation or a pitch, and I know some are going to look at this in a second, but the way not to finish is on questions. Do not finish by taking questions. And I know people are listening to me now going, pardon? There will be times you will give a pitch, and at the end of your pitch, you will be expected to take questions. The problem with that is that the questions could end up stepping on the message you would like your audience to hear. So what I promote is the idea that you deliver your pitch. When you get very close to the end of it, you turn around and you say to your audience, ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to do now is throw it out to you to see if you have any questions. If you have, I will take those questions, I will answer them, and then I have one thing that I would like to wrap up with. That one thing that you wrap up with might be the only thing people can remember from your presentation. And I think that the last thing you finish your pitch, your presentation with, should be a reinforcement of a message you would like people to hear, or it should be your carefully crafted words rather than your answer to their carefully crafted question. I've seen scenarios where people have been pitching for business, and the very final question that they got, which was the last part of it, was, do you mind me asking you, who did your slides for you? They're brilliant, which had nothing to do with the pitch whatsoever. And if that's the last thing people can remember, you're struggling to get your message across. So how can we finish? How can we close a presentation? Right, number one, we can finish by asking our audience a question. Ladies and gentlemen, if what I have spoken about this evening makes sense, would it not be a good idea to apply the persuade on purpose thinking to your next pitch or presentation? And get your audience to think about that question. Number two, you can finish by telling a story that reinforces the message or the point you would like your audience to take away. Number three, you can finish with a call to action. Ladies and gentlemen, if what I've talked about this evening makes sense, I believe the next step is to conduct a pilot program with a small team of your people to be able to identify what part of that program will work, where we can make changes before we roll it out to the larger group. Now, and I'm conscious of Ronan telling me at 45 minutes, so I'm going to go through the next piece reasonably quickly, and then we'll make sure we have enough time for the bits and pieces I'd like to do at the end. So this is the engagement piece, and again, this is a game changer for presentations and pitches. Before I get into how we can engage people in our pitches and presentations, I'd like to share with you my formula for communication, and it's this. C equals W plus I or. Communication equals words plus internal reactions. But here's the thing, ladies and gentlemen. Everybody focuses on the words. What we should be focused on is generating internal reactions. If you're going to get people to take a new action, if you're going to get people to believe something new, if you're going to get people to act in a different way, we have to generate an internal reaction. And that can be an intellectual internal reaction, or it can be an emotional internal reaction. If we only focus on the words, we only focus on the content. Focusing on the internal reactions will allow you to bring people on that journey with you. So, to give an example of what I mean, I want you to imagine that that black line represents a presentation. Our job as presenters is twofold. It's to get to the end of the presentation, the end of our pitch, and one is to make sure that people haven't got bored and switched off early on in the presentation. And secondly, it's to make sure that when they get to the end of the presentation, that they actually don't end up getting the wrong message to the one that we want them to get. So let's imagine that this is 45 minutes. This black line represents 45 minutes. What I believe we need to do is deliberately build in engagement techniques throughout the 45 minutes. So the black line represents content. So I'm going to start off by giving you content, and then I'm going to introduce something that is designed to engage you. And then I'll give you more content, and then I'll do something else to engage you. More content, engage you. More content, engage you. And throughout my presentation, I am trying to give you content that will engage you the whole way across. What that means is that I'm not giving you a 45-minute presentation. What I have done is I've broken it down into smaller, more manageable chunks. And that makes it easier for my audience to come along the journey with me. But it also makes it easier for them to remember it and recall the pieces that I want them to remember. So what can we do to keep people engaged? We can ask them questions. Act now. We can get the audience to do something. As I said earlier, that exercise with the pig was designed to get you involved in the presentation. We can tell stories. I've told you a couple of stories this evening about the guy going over to Boston, about the woman that I worked with in Galway, about the work that I did recently with the universities. On top of that, what we can also do is we can create word pictures in the mind of our audience. Sometimes when you're pitching your ideas, you're going to be talking about complex subjects, technical subjects, and the people you're pitching to might not have your expertise. One of the ways that you can bring clarity to your message, which on occasions might be unknown to your audience, is to attach your message to something they're already familiar with. So word pictures. The reason you could describe a bike or a bicycle or a sunflower or a bowl of vanilla ice cream with chocolate chips in it is because you can picture it in your brain. It's already in there. So it's a powerful way in which you can do that. And I think one of the really key things about these engagement techniques is that they force us to listen. And the benefit of that is that it makes it easier for people to remember what you were talking about. Do me a favor for 1 second. Again, if you don't mind, I'm going to ask you to unmute your microphones. Ronan, we're going to be a little bit later than 1945. So if you don't mind, can I ask everybody to unmute your microphones? We are going to play the listening game. Don't know if anybody's ever played this listening game, but we're going to play the listening game. And what we're going to do as a group, we're going to count to 20. But there are two things where this game is concerned. Number one, we're going to remove the number 5 and we're going to replace it with a clap. And number two, we're going to remove the number 15 and we're going to replace it with the noise that an elephant makes. But here's the thing. Only one person can call out a number or the clap or the elephant at any one time. If more than one person gives the same answer, we go back to the very, very beginning. So let's see how good we are at listening. I'm going to start. I'll go first. 1,
2,
3,
1,
2,
2, oh,
1,
2,
2,
1,
2,
2,
1.
2.
2.
I don't even need to say there's no strategy involved for this. You have to just breathe. Sorry, can I just say, when this is done, and I post a video thanking JCI Brazil for inviting me, I am going to tell the world, the JCI world, you have been the worst at this game so far. 1,
2, 3, 4.
Oh, but actually, hear me out for a second. There are two brilliant things happening right now. First of all, people are leaning in and listening. And secondly, people are not rushing to give their responses in any form of conversation. They are powerful tools to be able to allow you to have a level of control when you're communicating with anybody. One more time. 1,
3,
4.
5.
me too.
No 5.
There were people, first of all, it was on 5. Second, there were 2 people lined up waiting to go. For the record, I think that the European Conference, we got to about 10 in the end, but you are definitely going to get a mention when it comes to my recording a video afterwards. We got to 4. Thank you very much. Right. One of the other things I just want to say very, very quickly, and then we're very close to wrapping this up. When we communicate, ladies and gentlemen, we use an awful lot of words. And sometimes the secret is to be able to craft specific words in a specific way so that those words stand out from everything else around them. I can tell you that I speak at a rate of 134 words a minute. I'm a sad individual, I time. What it means is if somebody says to me, will you speak for 20 minutes? I know that I've only got 2,680 words. Here's the thing. 2,680 words for 20 minutes, you're going to forget nearly all of those words. The words that have the best chance of being remembered are the last words you hear me say, or words that are crafted in such a way that they stand out from everything else around them. Do me a favor, if you're taking notes, please write this down. This is what is known as the SCREAM method, SCREAM. And these are language devices that you can use to help part of your message or part of your pitch stand out from everything else around it. The S stands for simile, where we describe something as being as or like something else. And what we describe as being as or like is familiar to the audience, and that's what brings clarity to your message. The M stands for meta, down the other end, the M stands for metaphor, actually we do it the other way around. C stands for contrast. Contrast is where the second part of a sentence sounds almost like it is the reverse of the first part of the sentence. But because of how it is constructed, it makes it stand out from everything else around it. One of the most famous examples of contrast is from John F. Kennedy's inauguration speech in 1961, when he turned around and he said, "Ask not what your country can do for you, but what you can do for your country." The R stands for rhyme, and as it suggests, being able to phrase something in a way that it flows because the language is repetitive, makes it stand out. The example I always give, ladies and gentlemen, was it 3 years ago, there was a protest march in Dublin, and the protest was around the fact that the new maternity hospital might be run by one of the religious orders, and some people weren't happy about that. Throughout the march, all people did was protest in rhyme. Some of the rhymes I cannot share with you here today, but what I remember was people saying, "Separate church and state." And all you're looking for is something that can be said in such a way that it stands out and can be remembered long after you have said it. The A stands for alliteration. Alliteration is where every word in a sentence starts with the same letter or the same sound, and because of how it is constructed, it makes it stand out from everything else around it. There was one of the news channels about 6 months ago had a chyron going across the bottom of it, and it said, "Brexit bedlam for Britain." And when you think of how much information we process on a daily basis, being able to say something in a way that it stands out from everything else around it. The E stands for echo. And echo isn't necessarily a way of crafting language. Echo is where you take the same sentence and you repeat it a number of times throughout your pitch. And because it's repeated a number of times, it's easier for people to remember it long after you have said it. 10 years ago, I delivered a speech in Sligo in the west of Ireland that was entitled "Life's Too Short." The speech was only 7 minutes long, but in the 7 minutes, I used that phrase 7 times. The speech took place in May of 2010. In December of 2010, I was in a hotel in Dublin, and a man walked up to me and said, "Excuse me, is your name Eric Fitzpatrick? I saw you deliver your Life's Too Short speech earlier on this year." Ladies and gentlemen, this isn't about me. This is the fact that somebody could remember the message 8 months after they had heard it. Alliteration can help us to do that, or echo can help us to do that. Right, that was a whistle-stop version of everything we've been talking about. So I suppose right now, what I have to do, if nothing else, is try and demonstrate one of the things that I was talking about. So before I wrap up, and we're getting close to the point where I will wrap up, my question, do you have any questions?
So we have, sorry, Eric, I'm in I'm in the room, and I'm just looking at the chat here, and we have 2 comments from Leandra's first. Eric, in general, I use the first slide bracket with the title or subject as the last slide too.
Well, what you will see, Leandra, is I'm actually doing that this evening myself. If you're pitching, what I would suggest is find a way to insert the takeaway message that you want your audience to get. But if that doesn't stop you from putting your contact details at somewhere else on that particular slide, but it's about people getting the message that you want them to get. To the second question that's in the chat, what are your thoughts about adding a slide for agenda points? For me, it can work both ways. I know that when it comes to webinars at the moment in this format, I am currently doing that. And the reason I'm doing it is I'm trying to give my audience as many chances as possible to be able to follow the progress of what I am trying to say. That said, when I did the webinar this morning and the agenda points came up, I had 6 or 7 areas that I was going to cover, but I didn't actually reference them verbally. What I said to people was that this is what I'm going to cover, but ultimately what they will deliver for you is how do you make storytelling a deliberate part of how you communicate, and how you can benefit from making storytelling a deliberate part of how you can communicate. And look at your question, Claire. The first thing that I would say to everybody, what's your advice for getting nervous in front of audiences, even though you've practiced a lot? My advice is embrace it. And that's how I phrase this. If you're nervous, that's your body's way of recognizing that you want to do well for your presentation, number one. Number two, nerves will actually give you a certain amount of energy that will allow you to be passionate about the subject you're about to talk about. So I wouldn't fixate too much on trying to remove those nerves completely. I don't think they will ever go completely. On top of that, one of the things that I would suggest is, well, 2 things I would suggest. Number one, if you are nervous, when you start your presentation or your pitch, and that's usually where you are at your most nervous, speak deliberately more slowly than you would normally. Because what will happen is, if that's the normal rate you speak at, and the nerves and the adrenaline cause you to speak faster, if you consciously make a decision to speak more slowly than you normally would, the combination of the nerves and speaking slowly will get you closer to where your normal speaking rate is. The second thing, and I cannot stress this enough, one of the keys to controlling nerves is breathing. And one of the first things to go when we are nervous is deliberate, slow, big, deep breaths. I think one of the challenges, Claire, is that people often they speak too fast when they're nervous, and they leave out the pauses and the gaps at the end of sentences, and they're hugely important. When I'm coaching people, one of the things I find is that people will often turn around and speak too fast, and I've got to coach them to slow down. What I would say on occasions is, when you get to the end of a sentence, close your mouth and in your mind literally go 1001, 1002, 1003, and it'll feel like an age for you as a presenter, but it'll be ideal for your audience in giving them time to digest what you say before you move on to the next thing. Timings, it'll come with practice, but if you are, get a book and a stopwatch, read out loud for a minute, count the number of words, do it a second time, count the number of words, and then take an average of those 2 counts, and that'll give you your rate of speech. That will give you an indication of how many words you can use in an allotted time. I would argue that if you're asked to speak for 60 minutes, create 50 minutes of content and deliver it a little bit more slowly. What people often do is, if they're asked to speak for 60 minutes, they try to cram in 75 minutes of material. Better the other way around. There was something there. How do you add back the points that are missed while presenting because of nervous? Don't. People don't know what you've left out. And unless there's a very obvious gap in your presentation, don't worry about it. I'll hang up this call today. There will be bits and pieces that I haven't covered because it's a 1-hour webinar. We can't get into all of the details of it. But most people, I would argue, have walked away with value. Is that a fair comment? There are a number of ideas you can take and you can apply, and it will benefit you for your presentations. What do you do when you feel you're losing the audience? I'll make this the last question, then I'm going to wrap up very, very quickly. When you feel you're losing your audience, step away from your content to do something to engage your audience. And on occasions, that might mean actually stopping the presentation and having that conversation with them. Ladies and gentlemen, if you don't mind, I have a sense that I'm not really capturing your attention right now. Do you mind if I ask, is there a particular reason for that? And I appreciate that asking that question. You could turn around and have somebody go, yeah, because you're bloody boring. But the chances are it's because there is something going on in that organization, something going on in the mind of a listener. And I mean, look, I'll give you a very good example. Merlin, if you don't mind me taking you as the example, there is a real possibility that your focus has been on getting ready for your presentation, which means it makes it harder for you to focus on what I've been saying as part of my presentation, which is perfectly acceptable. But if everybody's doing that, I would stop my presentation and say, talk to me, tell me what's going on. Your audience will absolutely appreciate that because they've recognized you're not connecting with them. Right, there's been a huge amount. Muireann's going to go on in a minute or two. Let me wrap up by doing two things. Number one, let me ask you 4 questions. What we've spoken about for the last hour, has it contributed to your thinking?
Absolutely.
Do you think that some of what we covered will be easy to remember or recall?
Yes, and it's also recorded on YouTube if anybody wants to
That'll
watch
absolutely help as well, yes.
You're
Was it delivered in a way that was easy to understand?
Yes.
Was it engaging?
Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay, final 2 things. Please pick up your pigs. Point your pigs at the screen. Everybody hold up your pig so we can see your pig. I'm going to tell you what your pig says about you.
I'm sorry I missed this part.
You're going to regret missing this one, Claire.
Yeah.
So if you're looking at your page and your pig is facing left, that means that you are a progressive, forward-thinking type of person. If your pig is facing in the other direction, that means that you are set in your ways and you are slow to embrace change. If, like Carol, your pig is facing straight out, what that means is you are highly intelligent and you do not suffer fools gladly. If your pig has 4 legs, it means that you are trustworthy and reliable. If your pig only has 2 legs or less than 4 legs, you're not quite as trustworthy. If your pig has a huge amount of detail, you have issues of trust. You feel you have to do all the work. You can't trust other people to do it properly for you. If your pig has very few details in it, it means you just couldn't be bothered doing the exercise. And the last 2 things, if your pig has big ears, it means you are a good listener. And the final one, sorry, I'm going to shut this down so we can see everybody's pigs. The final one, ladies and gentlemen. Sorry, Alma, the ears on that pig are seriously impressive. Alma Gonzalez. The last one, ladies and gentlemen, the longer the tail you have drawn on your pig, the happier you are with your sex life. There's an incredibly long tail this morning on one of the pigs that we drew, and a couple of weeks ago with Network Galway, somebody had no tail on their pig. I'm going to finish with this, if you don't mind, and I apologize that I've gone a couple of minutes over time. Okay. One of the things I said early on is, and it's been made reference to, 3 years ago I wrote a book entitled Persuade on Purpose. One of the things that COVID-19 has allowed me to do during lockdown is actually record the content for the online version of the book that the content this evening has been drawn from. So what I would like to do is this. I want to make an offer to JCI Brazil and your members for the online course. When it comes out, it's going to cost €195. The offer to JCI members, which will be available until probably the end of August, is that it will be available for €50, which is pretty much a 75% discount. I'm going to put the link up here, but I've also sent it to Claire, and Claire can send it on to anybody if you are interested in it. I'm very, very grateful to JCI since I first came across them about 8 years ago. I think it's an incredible organization. Delivering these webinars is one of the ways that I like to give back, and getting the chance to meet so many JCI people has been hugely beneficial to me. This pre-order offer is another way in which I'm looking to give back to JCI. To be clear, if you do order it, it is going to be the end of August, beginning of September, before the editing has been done and it is ready to go. But the offer is there for anybody who wants to avail of it. I appreciate that you'll have had a huge amount of content tonight, but I've probably created some questions as well as provided answers as well. Other than that, from my perspective, and Myrna, I apologize, I've eaten into 4 minutes of your time. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you. I am very grateful to you for your time, your input, your contributions, and for the fact that some of you are now going to spend time trying to get longer tails onto your pigs. Thank you very much, everybody.
Thank you so much, Eric. I remember when I did the Startup Review event in the Dublin Chamber of Commerce with you about, gosh, it must be 5 years ago now, and we had a brilliant time. We had Gina Quinn talking, yourself. We had people from Enterprise Ireland, and Anthony Quigley from the director of the Marketing Institute. And then we, had a lot of interaction then in the afternoon when the groups of people were pitching their ideas and giving them feedback. It was a really good event. So I'm so happy to be doing this 5 years later with you on an international platform with JCI Brazil. So just thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time and effort to do this, Eric, and thank you so much for a fantastic presentation.
No, thank you, everybody.
Okay.
Enjoy, Myrna. Next one's going to be brilliant as well. See you later.
Yes. So without further ado, hey, Myrna, how are things?
Yeah, really good.
Thank you. All good. Great,
Yeah.
great. So I'd like to introduce you to our fantastic next speaker. Thank you so much for, again, taking the time and effort to be here at our international audience. One thing that I will say about Maureen, she has lived in Brazil 15 years ago and is absolutely fluent in Portuguese. Is that right?
Yeah, I remember every single word.
So, but anyway, I think from when I was talking to her, Brazil has a place in your heart.
Yeah, it surely does. Yeah.
And you had a great time. So I'm just going to introduce you then, just like 1 or 2 sentences, Maureen, just to give people a background, or would you prefer to do it yourself?
No, either way, if you want to do it, that's no problem.
Perfect. And then Muireann is going to talk for approximately 40 to 45 minutes, and then we'll have an opportunity to ask questions. If you do have questions in the chat, please feel free to put them in, and depending on how the presentation is, Muireann, I might come in. If
Absolutely, yeah.
Brilliant. So I'm just going to read it off here. Muireann is the founder of marketingcoach.ie. And Muireann shares her 15 years experience in marketing and brand strategy with companies. She mentors and trains companies to help them create and execute excellent marketing plans. And Muireann is a recent winner of the All-Star accreditation as an expert in marketing strategy. And she was also the winner of the Wicklow Businesswoman of the Year 2018 in the Best Use of Digital category. So I'm delighted to welcome Muireann, and super excited to hear your presentation.
Great. Thanks so much for having me. I'm absolutely thrilled to be here. When Claire mentioned about doing the talk, I was like, yeah, it's really interesting. JCI Ireland, brilliant. And then she said JCI Brazil was involved. I was like, absolutely, I'm all over it like a rash. So I'm really, really happy to be here. And I'm going to share with you the title of the talk tonight is How to Drive Business Growth During the Pandemic. So my speciality is in marketing, business planning in that area. So I'm going to share with you really principles of building your business. We happen to be in a pandemic, but they hold true in total regardless. So I hope you'll find it really informative. And what I'll talk about today will last you the lifetime of your business, because I'm dealing with businesses from startup to established businesses. And it tends to be the same thing you talk with business owners, regardless of what stage. So hopefully you'll find this as a resource to go through the lifetime of your business. So I will kick it off. Just bear with me 1 second. Okay. Now, so you should be able to see that. I'm just going to make my screen a little bit shorter. Okay, great. Okay, so one of I brought you through a couple of areas that I specialize in, and one of the things that I just wanted to highlight to you is that since I've set up my business 9 years ago, I've trained over 10,000 business owners in marketing and business planning. But actually, I've had a really nice opportunity to evaluate over 600 business plans, which is unusual. I used to run a program with a company that I worked with, where we did business plan evaluations for government qualifications, and it's really interesting to see under the bonnet of so many businesses. And what I want to do today is I want to share some of those insights, having seen such a breadth of different businesses that I've worked with over the years. So my background was in big business, so it was with corporates. So you guys would be familiar with Unilever. It's big in Brazil as well as here. So that would have brands like Axe, for example, the deodorant, which would be Lynx here in Ireland. And I worked with them for a number of years. Loved it, but decided at one point, look, I really want to set up by myself. So you're obviously at that point. You may be in a career in another organization and going, I just want to be in control of my own destiny and I want to set up my own business. So I was exactly the same. And I started up Marketing Coach and started working with a lot of smaller businesses relative to the likes of Unilever, but applying the principles of the best practice that I would have learned in those big companies and applying it into smaller companies. So Claire mentioned one of the parts of my career was living in Brazil. So I lived in Mato Grosso do Sul. So I don't know if any of you here are from Mato Grosso do Sul. Anyone here from Mato Grosso do Sul? I also lived just in north of São Paulo in São José do Rio Preto as well. I have the picture of a meat factory here, or frigorifico, as you'd be more familiar with. That's actually what I was doing when I was working in Brazil. So I was not I was not sunning myself in Rio de Janeiro. I was in the west of Brazil learning how to do the cuts of meat because I was a commodity trader when I was there. So we were buying Brazilian beef and sending it into Europe, Russia, and Asia. But I adored it. I absolutely loved it. I did learn Portuguese at the time, but I just can't remember any of it now. But that was just to give you a sense of my background. So to drive the business during the pandemic is a really interesting piece. And there's 4 areas that I really want to talk to you about. The first one is the entrepreneur equation. That's the first bit I'm going to talk to you about, is really the foundations of what is important in a business. And this across any business type that you're setting up. The second part is marketing strategy and structure. So understanding how do you get more customers, because that's a really key, obviously important part of having any business. And then choosing the right tools for your business and creating compelling messages. And I'll touch on some of the things that I know John, Wendy, Eric, they've been your speakers, bring that to life in a slightly different way tonight. So the entrepreneur equation, right? What I'm actually going to get you to do is I want you to think about businesses that you know that are really successful, because if you want to survive in business, what you really want to understand is the basics of what makes a good business, right? So what I'm going to get you to do is I'm going to get you to think of a business that you would see as very successful business, okay? So if you think about the likes of like Brahma, Skull, you can tell what I spent my time in Brazil doing. But if you think of any of the brands that you know that are really successful, what I want you to do is just get a piece of paper and write down what are the elements that make a very successful business. So if you had to do a brain dump of everything that you think a really good business has to have, what is it? Okay, so just take a pen, write down a couple of things. What makes a really, really good business? Okay, so I'm going to get you to share some of those things. Okay, so what would be some of the things that you think are necessary to have a really good business? So Gorkum, what about for you? What I saw you were busy writing.
Yeah, I wrote positioning and Business plan.
Positioning, business plan. Lovely, excellent.
Yeah.
Carol, what about for you? Carol might be able to hear us. Nicola, what about for you?
Hey, I chose Apple.
Yeah.
Because they're a global, massive company, and they're the leaders in tech. They're user-friendly, accessible, affordable, worldwide, best at what they do. So they're kind of first best type company.
So what happens is, right, when you're setting up a business, and I'm sure this has either happened to you or it will happen to you as you set up your business, is that it becomes very overwhelming when you think about all the things you have to do, and thinking even about the best in the business, whether it's Apple, it's Skull, it's, you know, in Ireland, it might be the Happy Pear, or any of the businesses that you think of. There's so many elements to it, from marketing, sales, leadership, you know, team. It just becomes really overwhelming. So what I want to show you is the entrepreneur equation, just so that you can cut away that noise, because actually you really want to understand what are the foundations of a really good business, and work from there up. So this equation, anytime you feel overwhelmed in your business at all as you're setting up, which I can guarantee you will, because it still happened to me 9 years later. So I don't know when that actually stops, but this is the equation that I want you to go back to. So, so the start of the equation is customers selling price. Okay, so that's the first. Customer size equals turnover minus costs equals profit. Okay, so if you were to strip back a cash flow, a business plan, all of it, right, and you had to just put it in a sentence, this is what a business is made up of. Okay, it's made up of customers paying you money, that gives you a turnover, you take away the cost it is to sell it, and that will give you a profit before tax. Okay, so that's like actually quite obvious, but we forget it when we're thinking about all of the different things that we have to do to set up a business, right? So if you think about this, turnover and profit, for example, are outcomes. Okay, so they're not inputs, they're outcomes. So the only thing that are inputs are these three things: customers by selling price minus costs. So it actually really focuses your mind in terms of, okay, what is important for me in terms of setting up my business? So if we take those out of the picture, what you're looking at is customers and selling price is all about marketing, okay? And costs is all about management. So your primary job, right, is to figure out, how do I get customers and how do I do it as cost efficiently as possible? So marketing, team, any of those things are only an aid of these three features, okay? So when you get overwhelmed at all you have to do is ask yourself, is this activity going to get me more customers? Is it going to help me raise my price, or is the price going to help me sell more? And what am I going to do to make this as efficient as possible? Okay, so it seems obvious, but actually we get lost in all of the different things that come at us as business owners. So what I'm going to concentrate on is this first part, the customers by selling price, because if you're going to survive a pandemic, if you're going to survive your first year in business, your first 5 years in business, your first 10 years in business, well, then we need to talk about customers. How are we going to get them? Because actually we don't have to worry about costs at all if we don't have the customers, because there's nothing to save on. So it's really important that we look at the customers itself. So that leads us into marketing. So what you really want to think about is that marketing is not there for marketing's sake. Like if you think about logos, branding, all of those different things, they're only to aid you getting more customers, right? So that's why you're doing marketing. And I think it's really important to have that from the get-go. So I did a piece of research last year with business owners who were established. It was over 100 business owners. And I asked them about the marketing that they were doing. So 78% of the businesses were spending money on marketing. So all of them were spending time, but 78% of them were spending cash, okay? 69% of them didn't have an assigned budget, which is a bit mad, isn't it? So you're spending money, but there's no actual assigned budget. And only 9% of them had a clear plan. So only 9% of them had a written plan on what marketing they were going to do for their business. So when I broke that down and did a bit more investigation of it, then 9% had a clear written down plan, 49% had a rough plan or were doing it on the fly. So by that, like, I mean that they had an idea of what they were going to do, but they were making a lot of decisions as they were going through their business. 34% did not have a plan but did want one, and 9% didn't want one and didn't have one. Okay, so 9% are happy out, they don't care about having a marketing plan, which would kind of actually correlate to the amount of people that are spending money on marketing. But what is really interesting about this is, why are so little people planning one of the most important parts of their business? It kind of doesn't make sense, right? But what happens is that we get really caught up in production. Okay, so as business owners, we're producing, you know, whether it's a product or a service, we get really caught up in that because we're really interested in it. And we lose sight in, actually, our main job as an entrepreneur is actually to get customers through the door and to make sure that they're satisfied. So the biggest gift you can give yourself as you set out into your entrepreneurial journey is write it down. Right? So it seems really obvious, but write it down. Have a marketing plan and put it down on paper. So I kind of just put this as a comparison, right? Most professionals have plans, right? So if you think about doctors, if you're going in for heart surgery, you want that doctor to have a plan on what he's going to do with the scalpel when he goes in towards your heart, right? So you expect that a doctor would have a plan for you. If you think about a pilot, like, the pilot just doesn't set off from an airport and go wherever he wants and take whatever direction he wants. He has a flight plan, right? He has it written down. And if that's not enough to convince you, I am sure you all know the A-Team. And I think it was popular in Brazil as well, but he has it. He's like, it's a plan. We just need a plan. So if you take nothing away from the rest of this presentation, just take away this. Write down what you plan to do to get more customers. Even if it is on the back of a piece of paper and stick it up on the wall, you will get yourself from that into that 9%. And that's actually where you want to be, because that gets you into being more strategic for your business. So what we want to think about is, we want to move from ideas to action. Okay, so what I want you to be thinking through now is, okay, I'm going to get information from Mern, but I'm going to think, how am I going to activate this into my business, what I'm planning to do? So this whole piece about customers, how do we figure out what we're going to do, and how do we figure out a strategy? So for a marketing strategy, there's always two elements of strategy. So initially, when you set up your business, you're concentrating on the one on the right? So that's your new customers. So you're 100% focused on, I need to get new customers through the door. What I want you just to have in the background of your head is that once you get a couple of customers through the door, you then need to have a second strategy for your existing customers. And the reason that I have gold on existing customers and grass on new customers is that for a lot of business owners, they're obsessed with new customers. And it's what I describe as the grass is always greener, right? So it's always, you're looking forward and going, I need more customers, I need more customers, which is good to do, right? But don't forget the ones that you get in the door, because actually the most cost-effective marketing that you will ever do is by keeping your current customers happy. Okay, so once you have one customer, you then have two strategies, right? And your second strategy is, how do I make this customer as happy as possible? So I'm going to look at the existing customers first, because I want to spend a bit more time on the new customers, because it's more relevant for you guys, because you're in startup phase. But the question, there's 4 questions that you have to ask yourself around existing customers. Okay, so once you get them, these are 4 questions you ask. So what do I need to do to get my current customers to buy more? Okay, so what do I need to do? Not like, what do they have to do? I have to think of some way that will entice them to buy more from me. Or what do I need to do to get them to buy more often? So it's a frequency thing. It's like, I need them to, you know, buy twice a week, or, you know, think about loyalty schemes from cafes. That's really what they're trying to do. They're trying to drive frequency, that you come in and buy more. What do I need to do to get my customers to pay more? So that might be upselling them, or it might be getting them to pay for additional products or services. So how do I get them to do that? I want more of their cash, or more of their wallet. Or what can I do to get my current customers to want to refer me? Yeah, so how do I get them to do that? So there are 4 questions that are really helpful, and to really build that gold mine with the customers that you do get on board. Then it's actually, this is just one, I'm giving this as an example. So I worked with a company called the Ink Factory. And they're a tattoo parlor in Dublin, and they came to me and they were asking me to do work with them on the getting new customers. And when I looked at their business, I was like, actually, do you know what? You don't need to get new customers on tattoos. What you need to do is look at your business, and there's actually a more profitable part of your business, which was their piercing part of their business. So they had two parts. They had people coming in for tattoos, and they had people come in for ear piercing, belly piercings, all of that. But actually, they just had the mindset of tattoos were what they did, but actually the more profitable part of their business was pierced. So what we looked at was how they actually explore that part of their business. And what we did was, and what they did was open a new brand called Pierced, which you can see is quite similar to their previous brand, the Ink Factory. But it was really because when they looked and asked themselves, who are our most profitable customers, they realized that they were focused on the wrong thing. So always look at your current customers and ask yourself, how do I maximize these? So I've put it in this, but it's a bit of a random picture, right? But it's a picture of a man called Frank Slevin, who I worked with for years. I worked with him for about 10 years. And every time I worked with him on a project in Dublin, which was this national event, which is 40,000 women running. It's called the Women's Mini Marathon, and it's running Dublin every year. But Frank used to come in to me to do business with me and try and get me to buy more stuff off him. But one of the things that Frank always did, which I just used to think was quite cute, was he always brought in jellies in when he was coming in to meet me, right? He was an older man. And every time he came in, I was like, I can't not say hello to Frank. Like, and sometimes it'd be up to my eyes. I did not want to talk to him, but I knew he was standing there with like either licorice or jellies or whatever it was. And it always stands in my mind is because he was treating me really nicely. So it was virtually impossible for me to say no to actually meeting him. So you don't even have to be extravagant when you're thinking about your current customers. Just actually be really nice to them and think, how do I make them feel really special? And you know, if it's a bag of sweets, you know, sometimes that works the trick for people. Okay, so if you look then at your future customers, your new customers, there's three things that you're asking yourself, right? Who is it that I'm trying to get as a customer? Where are they? And how is it that I'm going to communicate with them? Okay. So you're asking yourself, who are the people that I believe I can add value most with my product or service? Which one of these are most profitable for me? And how will I get to them? So what I'm going to get you to do is I want you to write down who is your ideal customer, right? So just write it down at the top of the piece of paper. Who is it that you really want to get as a customer? So for most startups, that list can be quite long because you're like, yeah, loads of people want what I have. And it's like, it's a lot for a lot of people that I would work with, they'd say, everybody wants what I have. I'm like, okay, that's nice. But we need to pick somebody. So everybody can be your customer. Okay, so everybody can be your customer, but you can't market to everybody. And the reason that you can't market to everybody is because you don't have enough time and you don't have enough money. So it's just a pure resource issue. Okay. So if you think about the likes of Nike, yes, technically they market to everybody. Okay. Everybody has a pair of Nikes nearly. But if you think about their marketing campaigns, they've completely separate marketing campaigns depending on what type of runner that you're buying off them. So if you're a marathoner, you're going to see their runners advertised in the likes of the running magazines. You know, the serious runners look at things differently than a casual walker. So you're going to see the walkers being advertised in like the Sunday papers or, you know, magazines, that type of thing, because they're not as serious about walking or running, right? So they have separate strategies depending on who their customer is. So your biggest choice is, who are you going after? And what you want to do is try and bring it down to one or two groups of people initially that you're really going to spend your time and your money on. That is where you get real efficiency with marketing. So how do you make the decision is the hard thing. So this is the bit that when you're starting out, you're like, well, I don't want to make a decision because I don't know who wants it the most. And it feels really risky narrowing it down, you know, all of those things. So that's completely understandable. But what you want to do is I'm telling you, you need to, right? So, because you just don't have enough time and money. So how do you make the decision? So there's 4 ways that you can make this decision. So the first one is who needs or wants it the most? So where is the greatest demand? The second one is where will I make most money? So who has the most money to spend? So startups love working with me, but startups don't have money. So I like working with startups and I'll do stuff, but I won't do a huge amount with it because they don't have money, right? So margin's important. The fourth one is ease. So how easy it is for you to access the particular market. So that will tend to be by your experience, your network, your expertise, basically your link with that market. So, you know, if I have worked with in a meat factory in Brazil, you know, well then maybe I might decide that I'll look at marketing for food brands and meat brands in Ireland, for example, because it's easy for me to have credibility and all the rest in it. And then the fourth one, so you have ease, you have demand, you have margin, essentially, and your fourth one is passion, because you can choose to work with whoever you want when you're an entrepreneur. But that's not the first one. Okay, so if you set up a business, don't get carried away with the people that you're most passionate about and forget the fact that they mightn't have enough money in it, or they mightn't need or want it as much as you think. So they're the 4 criteria for picking out what in the marketing terms is your target audience. Okay, so that is demand, margin, ease, and passion. So once you have chosen them, then you're asking yourself, where are they? Okay, so if you pick one target audience, okay, so if you just pick one from the list that you've written down and say, okay, that's the person I really want to get, what you're asking yourself is, what media do they consume, and where and who do they interact with? So you're asking yourself, what magazines do they read, social media, events, networks? You're asking yourself, where are they? So take a minute and write down for your target customer, out of the list of media and criteria that I've listed on the right hand side there, where do you think your customer is? Okay, so just take a minute to write down a couple of them. Okay, so I'm just going to give you an example of this for yourself. So I've just picked 3 different target audiences. Oh yeah, before I move on to that, I've put a crown here. So the reason that I've put a crown here is that there is no best place for your business to market. Okay, so there is no one marketing tool that is the best for your business. The way you make a decision on what is the best tool for your business is by picking a target audience and letting them guide you to where you should go. Okay, so that whole thing of the customer is king, if you have that in your head, your customer will tell you where the best place to reach them is. Okay, so you're not going to where you want to go. Like, I love Instagram, but if my customer isn't Instagram, I don't need to be there for my business. I can be there socially, right? So go to where your customer is. So a couple of practical examples. So for professional services, so this is like if you're trying to target, say, accountants, physiotherapists, vets, that type of thing, you might look at speaking at the national bodies, with the national bodies for those professions. So Eric mentioned earlier on that he did a talk for accountants at the national body for accountants in Ireland, right? So that is him doing really good marketing, because he can, okay, I want to target accountants because I know that they need to communicate better. So how do I reach a whole load of accountants? I go to the national body and I ask to speak at their events. Or it could be that you advertise with a magazine that is related for that particular sector. So that might be the way that you do it with professional services. But if you think about female business owners, they might operate in a completely different arena, right? So you might network with them in Ireland, the example would be Network Ireland and WIBN. They are specific networks got to do with women in business. So you might network with them, or you might do social media connections with people in social media that are relevant and important for female business owners. or it would be PR in relevant publications like Her.ie or the equivalent in Brazil. So you're thinking, where are my target audience, and what is it that I can do with them? Or the third one I had was for over 60s. Okay, so if you think about those, the over 60s, how they operate in the world is completely different than business owners, right? Or an accountant. So you wouldn't be marketing to them in the same way. So you might look at local groups, you might look at PR in the local media, or Facebook advertising, because actually the over 60s are really big on Facebook, not so much Instagram, but on Facebook anyway. So where you market is all dependent on where your particular customer is. Okay, so once you've decided where they are, then you're asking yourself, what are you going to do and what are you going to say? So I'm going to bring you through three elements of what are you going to say. So I'm going to bring you through place, and I'm actually two elements of place, and I'm going to bring you through the message. So what you do once you have identified the target audience, where they are, then you're asking yourself, okay, what is it that I want to say to them? So the way that you talk to your customer is in a couple of different ways. Okay, so there's one which is the messaging, and that's what Eric was talking about. It's like what we say, right? But there's loads of other ways that we communicate as a business to our customers. We communicate through the product, we communicate through price, we communicate through place, we communicate with how we promote, we communicate with the people that work for us, we communicate with the how we work, the process, and then we communicate with the message as well. So I'm just going to give you two examples of how this translates into place with some businesses that I've been working with recently, right? So this is a physiotherapy company in Galway in Ireland, and this was their website, right? And they came to us because they wanted to redo their website. But when you look at their website at the moment, what is the impression that you get of this practice? Yeah, of course, like it's terrible. It's a brutal site, right? It looks like something out of the 90s. It is terrible. What you wouldn't get the impression from this is that the guy who owns this business, Michael Gallagher, is the expert in Ireland on treating vertigo for patients. He is renowned in the west of Ireland for being absolutely amazing at what he does. This does not tell that story. If you're thinking about how much you would pay a physio, like judging by his website, I'm not thinking he's anything special. Like, so if he was demanding a higher price for his services, and I happen to go onto his website to look up what his prices are, there's no reason for me to pay an extra, 50 or 100 euro. His website looks brutal, right? So I can say this because he knew it, so that's why he came to us to talk about it, right? But what he needed to do is communicate to his customers better about who he really was, right? So when we did redid the website, we really wanted to communicate that to them. This is a picture of their staff, and if you see on the right hand side, the staff were mortified. They were like, we're not even posing for photographs for this website. It is nobody sent anybody to it because they were just embarrassed by it. So we redid their website, and we wanted to position them as the experts in the west of Ireland for physiotherapy. And you can see straight away it just gives you a completely different impression, right? We got them to redo the photographs, and we really got them to push themselves forward as the centre of excellence in the west of Ireland. It's only simple things. It didn't cost a fortune for them to do this, but even if you think about the impression that it gives, like just in terms of like your expectations of what this brand is all about, it changes it just simply by the communication that they have. We made sure that we were able to highlight each of the physios in the practice with their specialist areas. So it wasn't only heroing Michael, who was the lead of the business, but it heroed everybody with their specialities within the business itself. So there's really simple things, like it's not just about what you say, it is also about all of these different elements: the product, price, place, promotion, people, process. You communicate through all of these different mechanics. So the question that I always ask people is, have you done a Google search on yourself, right? So if you don't have a website, at least go off and Google and see what comes up when you put in Warren Fitzmaurice or Stevenson von Durador. What comes up when you put in that name, because that's the impression that the customer will have of you. Another element of place is a physical space. So I was working with the veterinary practice there last year, and veterinary practices in Ireland are very traditional. So these are images that I've just taken of 2 veterinary practices. They're kind of old-fashioned enough when you go into them, and they tend to be quite smelly, right? Given obviously the job that they have a lot of animals in and out. So the practice that I was working with, they wanted to just be completely different than anything else that was out there, and they wanted to do it through their place, so through the venue. So they built this new venue and they wanted to make it really cool, and just make it completely stand out from what was out there in the marketplace. So one of the things that we wanted to do was do it through their brand itself. So if you ever see, and I'm not sure if it's the same in Brazil, but for any veterinary practice in Ireland, it's always blue or green, okay, the logo, and it will either have a cross, a paw, or a cat or a dog on it, right? So I don't know if it's the same in Brazil, but that is pretty much all veterinary practices in Ireland. So what we want to do is something slightly different. So this was the origins of the brand that they had themselves, which was called Glen Veterinary Clinic, and we wanted to make this feel really modern and fresh. So this was the new version of their logo, and what we wanted to give across was this really solid, substantial feel. And there's a brand in Ireland called Brian Thomas's, right? And it's a really exclusive brand. An equivalent of it would be like Tiffany's, you know, Tiffany in New York. That's the impression that we wanted to give across, of a real prestige brand, and we wanted to make it a destination spot when you went to this veterinary practice. So we put the logo in the practice itself, but what we wanted to do is give this standout kind of feel. So we got these absolutely massive graphics done up to really just make the feel of this completely different than the traditional way that you would come across in a veterinary practice. We on the other side of the building, we did these big farm animals because they were also a farm veterinary practice as well. But you can even get a sense from the pictures, like it just feels completely different to what is out there. And we had the logo emblazoned everywhere, where it was like, look, we're the shield for pets and large animals. And this is the what we got done in the grooming area. But you can see it translates into their branding as well. But the biggest difference for this was that how the people felt about their brand. So the staff and everybody just felt so excited because they liked the brand on their chest, they liked the brand on their clothing, they liked the look of their venue, and they just felt proud of the brand. So there's loads of ways to communicate about what it is that you do. Just in this phase alone, like just from doing this refresh, their business increased 30% as a result of the rebranding that we did at that time. So you kind of have to open up your mind. There's loads of different ways to drive growth for your business, loads of different avenues to try and communicate what you do to your customer. But the other one that I want to talk to you about is the messaging, so the verbal messaging that you have. So what I want you to do is I want you to write down 3 sentences that if you met somebody on the street tomorrow and they said to you, what is the business that you're setting up, and you had to describe what you're doing in 3 sentences, write that down. Okay, so just take a minute, write down 3 sentences you would use to describe your new business or the business that you're in. Okay, so generally the structure that people follow when they're like, if you're at a networking event or anything like that, the structure that people typically will follow is as follows. They'll say, who am I? they'll say, what do I do? And they'll say, who do I do it for? So they'll say, hi, my name is Myrne. I do marketing consultancy and I do it for veterinary practices and accountants. Okay. So generally that is how people describe what they do, right? So that's great and that's nice. But actually what Eric was talking about earlier on is really true in terms of communicating your messaging from a branding point of view. The next two questions are the ones that I want you to really think about. So what I want you to do is I want you to write down the customer that you do whatever your product or service you provide for. What is it that that customer really needs and wants from you? Okay, so write that down. What does the customer really need and want from you? And then another question that I want you to write down the answer to is, how do they transform as a result of working with you or buying from you? So how is their world better as a result of you and your business? So it's that sentence that you want to start with as opposed to end with, right? So generally people's last sentence is their best sentence, right? And what Eric mentioned earlier on, what people are concerned about is themselves, okay? So they don't care about you. They don't care about your product. They don't care about your service. They don't care about anything got to do with you. They care about themselves. So that is the bit that you talk about first. So if you're an accountant, they're not so much worried about accountancy. What they want is peace of mind. What they want is that they won't get in trouble from revenue or from the government if they don't pay their taxes correctly, right? So they essentially want peace of mind. What is it that you're actually doing for people? And that's what you want to talk about. It's the benefits. So the easiest way to think about this is that you're either going to increase something or decrease something for somebody when they buy your product or service. Okay, so that's what you want to think. What am I increasing? What am I decreasing? And that's a really handy tool to think of when you're trying to do this. So if you're an accountant, I give business owners peace of mind. If I'm a fashion designer, I make women or businessmen feel confident and powerful. If I'm a barber, I help men feel and look great. If I train entrepreneurs, I help people turn ideas into very successful businesses. Or if I have a social media business, I help entrepreneurs find their customers. So like for me with marketing, no one cares that I do marketing. All people want to know is, will you grow my business? Will you get me more customers? So that's really all I have to talk about. It's like, what do you do, Myrne? I help people get more customers. Grand. They don't care if it's marketing, social media, standing out in the street, waving a sign. Don't care. They want to know, oh, you can help me with getting more customers. Fantastic. So that's what you always want to lead with your message. So the key message from me to you is no one cares about you. But that is the key one. They care about themselves. So really think about it. I know I was listening to Wendy's talk the other day and I would have a very similar sentiment. I think actually fundamentally it comes down to, if you stop thinking about how you can sell to people and start thinking about how you can help people, marketing is much more effective. And I think actually with everything going on with the pandemic, with everything got to do with business, that actually if you have that as the core of yourself as an entrepreneur, as a business owner, and go, how can I help people? Because if you're helping people, look better, feel better, make more money, reduce stress, whatever it is, however your business helps them, well then that is a real strong foundation for business growth in the good times and the bad times. So that is just into the very last piece, which is the power of three. So what I just want you to think of is that it's going back to that overwhelm part. If you take away everything, what are you left with? You don't want to be thinking about doing too many things. So what I would suggest is that when you're thinking about marketing, always think of the power of three. Do 3 things targeted towards your customer and do them really well and do them consistently. Okay, so if it's going to be that you're going on LinkedIn, you're going to do events and you're going to do networking, well, do them well and do them consistently. So consistency is key with marketing. It's showing up, you know, it's a bit like exercise. You know, it's great if you go and run a 5K, but it doesn't make you fit, right? You know, to be fit, you have to go to the gym every day or, you know, every couple of days, which I'm just learning at the moment. I just hired a personal trainer and he's talking all about it these days. But it's the same with marketing. Show up regularly and consistently, and that's what really good marketing is. That's what will drive business growth. Okay, so that's just a summary of some of the things that we talked about this evening. These are the key drivers of growth from my perspective. And if you boil it back down to the basics, it is just customers by selling price equals turnover minus cost equals profit. So your main job as an entrepreneur is really about how do I get customers, how do I keep them? Okay, that is the core drivers of business growth. So what I'm just going to invite you to do before we finish up, and we can do a Q&A as well, but just write down one thing that you're going to take away from this training session. So what is one thing, one insight that you really want to remember from what we've talked about tonight? So I'm going to be really bold, considering Eric told us not to end with Q&A. I'm totally going to do it. So is there any questions that you have, or any insights that you're looking to get? So I see one from Stephen there. So what's a great formula for companies spending on marketing? So it's a really interesting one, and it differs depending on what stage of business you're at and what your ambition is. So often people would say, like, what's the percentage that I should be spending? But when you're a startup, you have no percentage, so because you have no turnover. So percentage isn't a good measure. So when you're starting up, it's how much can I afford? Okay, so there isn't much more than you can do from that perspective. So the first thing is how much can I afford? But the real question that you're asking yourself is, what is it going to take for me to get and reach the customers that I'm really trying to get to? And if you do that formula of who are they, where are they, and how can I, what can I do, how can I reach them? If you do that and actually do it from a practical point of view, cost it up, and then ask yourself, okay, which of these tools are the ones that I think I need to spend money on in order to actually get these customers? And that will give you a realistic price on how much it's going to cost you to reach them. If you're in business, and you're in business a while, generally, roughly speaking, a guideline would be between 8 and 12% of your turnover for marketing. But if you're in a growth stage, it would be more than that. So if you're really trying to, you know, be aggressive with market share or something like that, it would be more than that. But they don't be guidelines. Like, I mean, for the majority of startups, it's generally, I have no money, so how do I do this all for free? What's your favorite marketing sales film? Interesting. I don't think I have a film, but I've loads of books.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Or any good? Another thing. Well, no, answer that first, and I'll put it in the chat.
So my favorite book is, by far, is The Purple Cow by Seth Godin. I just love it. I love it. And the reason I love it, it's all about building marketing into design. So marketing not being an afterthought, but actually building it into it. And the other brilliant book for startups is The E-Myth by a guy called Michael E. Gerber. That's amazing. And that is another book that will last you the whole lifetime of your business. Because I've gone back, because I teach it, I've gone back and read it a couple of times, and every time I've gone back and to read it, I've learned something because I'm at a different stage of my own business. It's a real evergreen kind of book, but I love that. What was the veterinary marketing budget for this mind-blowing change in their image approximately? So there was different elements to their plan. So there was one part which was the branding part, which I think, how much did the branding? I think was around 5,000 or 6,000 euro, just for the logo and the branding and all of the material for inside their venue. But then they had their website, which was another part. And then they also had the marketing strategy itself. So they had to do the marketing strategy, like the location was just one element of it. So how they were going to promote themselves and all that was separate. So they spent a good bit of money on it, but yeah, it really has benefited them for, like, they're in their year 2 now, and they're just kind of reaping the rewards of an ongoing now, which is really good. Any other questions? Claire, you were going to ask me something.
I was going to ask you, yeah, I have a couple of things. God, I think I could chat to you for ages. Thank you so much for an amazing presentation. I think there's loads of things that people, you know, can take away from it. So first of all, thanks a million. I have somebody here from Brazil, so I'm going to get that. I'm just going to read out their question first before mine. Hi, Miriam, in your vision, the formula of a good marketing strategy in the Irish companies also can work in the Brazil market. So I suppose talking about cultural.
Yeah, and see, that's the lovely thing. It actually works regardless of the product type or the country, because actually the formula is just straightforward. Like, marketing is not rocket science, right? So it's not complicated. Like, what you're really saying is, like, it's like dating, or that's actually the equivalent of what it's like. So what you're saying is, like, I really like this type of person, right? So you're gonna, like, okay, well, I want to date that type of person. So if I'm going to date that type, like, I want to date a hockey player, right? For whatever reason, I want to date a hockey player. If I want to date a hockey player, what do? I go, where are the hockey players? Yeah. And then I go, okay, well, you know, where are they likely to hang out? What are they likely to do? What are they likely to read? I will go and I will put myself in the situation where a hockey player is likely to see me, right? So it is no different with, if you're trying to, like, marketing is the equivalent of dating for products and services, right? So you're just doing exactly the same thing. And, like, if you think about that from a very true perspective, if you're trying to get someone and, you know, trying to have a relationship with them, then you're trying to put your best foot forward. So, like, when you're on a date or whatever it is, you're trying to showcase the things that are most attractive about you. You know, like, you don't show your dark side or anything like that when you're dating. So, like, marketing is so similar to any kind of human, like, communication, the basics of human communication. So if you just go back to, this is the person that I want to talk to, this is the relationship I want to build. So where are they? And how will I connect with them in a very authentic way? And that's, you know, that goes beyond, you know, location.
Anybody else like to ask a question?
I'm so glad you didn't ask them to me in Portuguese. Lembro nada agora.
So
I do try and use my Portuguese every so often, but it's only with people who don't speak Portuguese, so that I look really good. And it tends to be when I've had a few drinks and I think I'm fluent. So I won't try that now.
Probably a basic question, but you use, you know, in your presentation, you use the word marketing, but a lot of that comes into sales, I think, as well. So is there a difference between marketing and sales, you know, or people get confused, I think, by both terms?
Okay, so it's really good to understand where the words come from, and it helps clarify it, right? So if you think about marketing, where it actually comes from is farming, okay? So if you think about a farmer who wants to sell his cattle, where does he bring them? He brings them to the market, okay? So he brings them to the market to sell. So marketing is everything that you do to get ready to go to the market, to make sure you're in the best position possible to sell when you're there. So marketing is all the preparation in order to, when you get to go to do the selling, that the person is already predisposed to want to buy from you. Okay, so marketing is everything up to that point in which you're having that conversation. So, like, even if you think about the word branding, like, it comes from farming as well. So branding, it exists because when the farmer was away from his animal, which he was doing because he was going and buying, you know, other cows or other cattle or whatever it might be, he had to make sure that his cows stood out from the other cows that were there, because all cows look the same. So the branding was there so that it could be seen that that is the cow from Muireann's farm, or that is the cow from Claire's farm. Claire doesn't feed her cows really well, and everybody knows that Claire is not a great feeder of her cattle, but Muireann's a great feeder. So it's to signify that when I'm not in the room, that you know what my product or service is. So actually, I think when you think about it from a farming perspective, you kind of go, actually, this all makes sense. So it's, you know, it's branding, it's marketing, and then the sales happens at the marketplace.
Mhm. Anyone else? I'm going to ask you one more, well, unless somebody has something else. One other thing, kind of two mini questions, if that's okay, and then we'll wrap up, Muireann, because I'm conscious of time. It's 20:58, so we have 2 minutes. So first of all, who inspires you? And then a lot with marketing and sales, and you've dealt with so many clients, you know, you're talking about 600, you know, businesses. How do you keep your creativity? Because they're very different type of businesses.
So who inspires me? Mostly the people that I work with, actually. So I love being in the entrepreneurial world, and I think for any of you who are now involved in entrepreneurship, you get it's the smell of excitement of like someone launching their own business and living their dream. That like really for people who have, a lot of people that I would know that work in other people's businesses, they don't have that. So I just find that like people who have their own business, you just get very interested in what they're doing, and so I find that really inspiring. And there'd be a couple of people that I would know that the people that inspire me are the people that manage their business and life. So I think that's like a key inspiration for me, because there's a lot of people who are very successful in business, but they have like broken marriages and, you know, a whole trail of destruction behind them. So that's what I really look for, is who are the people that seem to have a good balance. Because I have a daughter, I have a 4-year-old, I don't want to be spending all my time working. So they're the people that I really kind of look for. Creativity, it's just so endless when you're coming to marketing. Like I deal a lot with, like at the moment I have 4 physiotherapist clients, all different ones. And you would think like you'd be bored stupid, Muireann, like physios are physios, but each of their marketing plans are different because they all have a different aspiration for their business. So once you hear what someone's, you know, like I have one woman who's 77 and she's redeveloping her website and she wants a marketing plan. Like she's just amazing. Like I just absolutely love her. Her website is Triple Therapy Sligo. She's just amazing. So she's really inspiring. And the creativity is great around her because like she's like learning social media like, at the moment. And I have another girl who's really young. She's 39-year-old physio. She wants to completely revolutionize women's health in Ireland. One of the other physios is up in Donegal, and she wants to revolutionize the golf sector for physiotherapy. So like you can have exactly the same business, and the creativity is there because everybody has different ambitions, right? So yeah, it's wonderful. Like for all of you who are setting out in your entrepreneurial journey, or you know you're on this path now, I just wish you the best of luck because it's so enjoyable. You know, I'm so glad I did it. And it can be really scary, it can be overwhelming, and it's still, that all still happens to me still, but that's the excitement, that's the, you know, that's the piece. And you know, having connections like JCI really help keep you grounded and keep you supported through that journey. So you know, thank you so much for having me tonight. And you know, connect with me on LinkedIn, or you know, you know, on Instagram, or whatever your favorite tool is. But LinkedIn, I tend to be on quite a lot, so connect with me on that, and I'm, you know, happy to help in any way I can.
Pleasure, absolute pleasure. Again, just thank you so much, Muireann. I found your presentation very inspiring, and I feel energized afterwards looking at it. So thank you so much. I think even as an organization like JCI, I think there's a lot to take from when we're trying to attract, you know, members of the public to join our volunteering organization. There's a lot of food for thought there. So thank you very much. Nicola's there, a wonderful, inspiring presentation. Thank you. Amazing session from Gorkum. Thank you, Muireann. Vanessa, thanks to all involved. Has been a very interesting few days over the Startup Review. Hopefully can make connections and get started on my new chapter, referring to JCI. So loads of positive comments there. So I'm just going to wrap up quickly. I just want to say thank you so much to the people that were involved in organising the Startup of You event. You're the last speaker of our series, and you did not disappoint. You're fantastic. And also thank you to Ronan Nisi as well. It's his birthday today. And I really appreciate you hosting the first session for me. And everybody, I hope, says happy birthday to Ronan. I'd almost be singing happy birthday to you to try and you'd be a little bit embarrassed, but Ronan is our fantastic president of JCI Ireland, and he's been a great support for this event. Also, Tynan, where are you? I hope you're there. And thank you very much for all the technical side of things. He's the president of JCI Brazil, who helped set up this as well. Leandra, Anya as well, who's helping me host some of this session. So are you there, Tynan? Are you? Brilliant. Okay, so I'd just like to ask you just to put on your cameras there just for one moment, if all of you are still there. I know it's 3 minutes past. And I would hope to think, Tynan, that we can continue this on for next year. This is the first time we've gone international with this, Maureen.
Amazing.
Yeah, and
if you're doing it the next time, I'd like it to be in Brazil, and I will go. It will give me an excuse to practice my Portuguese.
Yeah, we can have it in. Do you know Florianopolis?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where Tynan is from. So let's host it. Let's host it in Florianopolis, Tynan. What do you think? This time next year, Tynan. You're there with your mask. All right, guys, I'm going to take this quickly. Thank you. I'm just going to do there quick.
That's amazing. No, not this time. Now it's winter.
Pardon?
It should be summertime.
Yeah. Oh, summertime. Yes. Yeah. Maybe near Carnival. What do you think, Maureen?
Indeed.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah. So I was just saying to Tynan, we should, hopefully this event will run at this time next year or during the summertime if it is in Brazil. Because I think it's been highly successful and the speakers have been fantastic. And I hope our Brazilian friends have got a lot out of this as well, and that you've learned a lot. And it's great to collaborate, build the networks as well internationally. And as you said, I think the creativity is linked with helping people as well. You get and the inspiration, as you said, when you're working with all of these businesses and you see their business plans come to fruition. I think I imagine you get a great buzz out of that,
Yeah,
so
totally.
So listen, thanks so much. I hope you have a lovely evening. Greetings from JCI São Paulo. That's from someone else, and then Tynan. Yeah, I was just reading some comments again, and I hope to be involved this time next year. So thank you very much.
Thank you so much
for everything. Okay, bye-bye now.
Good night.
Bye-bye.